Good morning, everybody. Delighted to be here to tell our story of knowledge-powered customer experience and advisor experience transformation at EE with eGain. Let me start by just giving you a little bit of background on where EE came from. Essentially, pre-2010, it was Orange and T-Mobile, that then a joint venture was formed from France Telecom and Deutsche Telekom, creating everything everywhere. That then was rebranded in 2012 to become what it is now, EE, and in 2016, BT acquired EE, and now EE is part of BT Group. So just to give you a little bit of context on EE, it's the largest mobile network in the UK. We have 19 million customers and 31 million connections. It's Europe's fastest growing 4G network and the first European network to deliver 14 million 4G customers. It's delivering the next generation of voice and data services for the UK's emergency services network. We've got over 10,000 employees. We're the #1 best big company to work for, according to the Sunday Times in the UK. We have over 600 stores. We have 90% geographic coverage, and we're the #1 for iPhone in Europe. And we've got a number of UK firsts, including Wi-Fi calling, HD voice, picture messaging, as well as a number of other things. As far as customer service goes, we answer around 3.5 million calls every month, plus around 700,000 outbound calls. We have 6,500 in-house contact centre advisors across 6 UK contact centre sites, plus we have partners in UK and Ireland. 100% of our calls are now answered within the UK and Ireland, and we have 10 million customers registered via our digital service app, MyEE, and our customers are happier than ever. I'm now going to tell you the story of our knowledge transformation, and I'm going to start with the challenge. So the first thing we realised, we had a problem in terms of variation in performance across our service areas. And we asked ourselves the question, is it the people delivering great service regardless of the process? Or is it the process delivering great service regardless of the people? What we found was we had a huge range in performance across our advisors. Very, very wide range indeed. But when we looked into it, what we found is our best people could actually crack the problem. So we looked across the quartiles and we found those in the top quartile really knew how to solve the problem. So that gave us some ideas on how we would fix it. We also had 4 different knowledge tools. Part of this was, as I mentioned earlier, around Orange and T-Mobile coming together. We had the legacy systems, but we'd also started the first phase of our EE journey. We had, across the 4 systems, we had about 10% consistent use of knowledge. So our advisors were using it consistently around 10% of the time, often relying on what they had in their heads to replay back the story to the customer, which sometimes would give incorrect information because process may have changed or they may have forgotten what's actually been covered off. We had inconsistent information because sometimes we'd have the same article that gave you a slightly different view on how to do or how not to do something. And it was hard for an advisor to find what they needed because they were searching for things. And sometimes, unless you really knew what to search for, it was really, really difficult to actually understand how to get the result you needed. We were using, which is quite commonplace, tick sheets to capture contact reasons. So at the end of the call, we were asking our advisors to select from some drop-down lists, why did the customer call us? And we had over 20,000, when we did the audit to count them, individual articles of help and support across all of our operational areas. Some of them were duplicated, but some of them were actually, unique articles, which were in varying levels of health. So some were up to date and correct, some had become a little bit aged and things, which again I think is fairly commonplace. So we chose eGain because of its product capabilities, namely in the knowledge management, artificial intelligence, analytics, and the engagement platform perspective. But really it was about the desire to work with us and realise our ambition. They wanted to be part of the vision that we had in terms of transforming. Also, calibration and the flexibility to align as we grow so that it wasn't just a one-off piece of work, it was effectively a partnership to move us along, is what we saw. And the ability to implement change quickly and allow us to customise our solution, because we had some specific requirements we wanted to deliver as part of this. So now, what we did, we took our inspiration from the UK's NHS triage process, and the key thing there was we can't afford to get it wrong. We had a big challenge in terms of sometimes we were giving the wrong information out, which drove complaints and things like that. So it was really important to us, and we really used this as our anchor on what we wanted to get right, which was essentially to make sure we didn't get it wrong, and really, really serious about that. We called the system, like I'm sure a lot of you guys do as well, but we called the system Albert. No guessing why we called it Albert, but essentially we use it for customer and device information which we feed into the system. We use it to pause and resume sessions, so if for whatever reason a conversation's interrupted, sometimes it's from a customer perspective, someone might ring the doorbell and they say, I'll have to come back to you later, or it could be that we need them to go away and do something. It may be a case that they need to do something with the handset and it's not practical to continue a telephone call at that point. We also save the sessions so that you can pick them up later and we can review the data from them. And we copy the information across then to our CRM when we're finished, so everybody across the organisation can see there's been a contact and a guided help flow run for the customer. As you saw earlier, we start with essentially a number of tiles, which essentially we normally have 25 core tiles, which is the key reason for contact. We did look at automating this, but sometimes the customers come through, for example, with a billing inquiry, but it ends up being technical support that's required. So we allow the advisor to have the conversation with the customer and set down the right path. We use the information that we feed into the eGain solution to pre-answer questions, and effectively it gives some AI guidance to start the process off. This reduces handling time. It also drives the right process with the logic being added in to make sure that we go down the right route for the right customer, for the right product type. What we found as well is it really annoyed our customers if we start asking them questions which we should know already, such as, are you pay monthly, are you pay as you go, what product have you got? Because we should know all of that information, so feeding that through really makes a difference. We also try and automate the process for the advisors to feed through along so that we don't essentially start off as I mentioned at the very beginning, and we answer those questions to get as far along the guidance as we can. It also allows us to reuse content but profile it by the brand, because we operate a number of brands, so that we can fine-tune that to make sure that we only have to write some of the articles once and then use the information across it more than once, so it helps us reuse that content. The way we have it set out essentially is the first left-hand side of the screen, as you can see up there. That's the bit the advisor interacts with. It's typically a question or a statement, or select something to say to move you on to the next step. The middle of the screen effectively has the agent guidance and agent help in. That's sometimes telling the advisor to go and do something in the CRM, for instance. So it may be to add a product on, check a product status, it may be to do something else. It may also have some guidance if it's a specific script that we need to follow for legal or regulatory reasons. We would include that in that section as well. We do give the advisors complete freedom to have the conversation with the customer in exactly the way they want to have the conversation to make it engaging and compelling. It isn't a scripting tool for walking through, but where we do have specific phrases that may be useful, we would include them in there as well. On the right-hand side of the screen, at the top, there's a feedback button. Essentially, we'll come on to that in a minute, but we found that really important to include as part of the solution. We also have a restart button, so if you happen to have gone down the wrong route completely, you can quickly get back to the beginning and go down another route. More often than not, though, people don't tend to use that, but it's useful if, for whatever reason, we started off with one type of problem and it ended up being completely different rather than just something we would navigate across to. Below that, we've got what we call breaking news, or Albert breaking news as we call it. Essentially, that's for information that may come up that we wouldn't put in the process. We would actually use it as additional context. So it's not process related, but it's something you may need to be aware of when dealing with the customer. So if it's a process change, we would update the content, and then you follow the guided help, and you're always following the right process. So as I mentioned, the feedback button then drives into a feedback loop. And what we found really important is we need to listen to the advisors, because we've got thousands of advisors out there that are reviewing this each day. And by providing a feedback option in the solution, we automatically get fed back if there's anything wrong. And what we committed to do to ensure it's successful is to feed back to the advisor on every piece of feedback that comes in. So if an advisor takes the time to feed back, we will go back to them, normally within 24 hours, and tell them what we are doing with that feedback. This ensures that they keep feeding back to us. It's been really, really effective. Sometimes it may just be a small mistake in the content that we need to put right, and then we get that done pretty much straight away. Other time, it could be something that needs completely reviewing, and the whole content or the guided flow needs restructuring based on the feedback. But the key thing there is if we've not got it right, we want them to tell us. So what we delivered, we rolled out essentially a complete rewrite of the content, and we used our best performing advisors to do that. Previously, we'd used the process team to write the content. And what we found with that was, by using the process teams, you would tend to write in language that was more internally or product focused rather than customer focused. And by using the advisors to write that content, we were getting much more relevant customer speak, because they're the closest to the customer. We also overlaid then the process with the best practice to make sure it was absolutely the correct process, the right practice, and the right language being used across there. From a training perspective, we deployed and trained over 10,000 advisors and 600 retail stores. And it's now completely business as usual in our contact centres. It's completely embedded, and it's exactly the way we work. From a knowledge content perspective, we moved from the 20,000 individual articles we talked about earlier to 25 guided help tiles, as you saw on the screen. We did a complete overhaul of the knowledge and the content, and created and then drove adherence to standards. We created a clear content ownership and clear content accountability. And that was really, really key to getting this right, because in parallel with the solution, transforming the way we created knowledge really went hand in hand then to deliver something that was really successful. We created a single knowledge content team, and how we have that set up is we have a core team of people that effectively drive the standards, how to work, adherence, making sure we're doing things consistently, but we also then bring in the advisors still into that mixture, because they really understand the customer experience and bringing that back into it. And we have a clear governance model, just a little picture of it on the bottom there, which effectively means that we run a process whenever we need to do changes to make sure we're consistent, to make sure it's reviewed properly, to make sure we're relevant, we're training people on what they need to do differently if we need to train them, if it's more complex than just a normal change, and we're doing all those relevant things so everybody is aware. And that really has lifted the bar completely in terms of how we operate there from a knowledge perspective. In terms of results, as you saw earlier, when we deployed this, we measured it. And one of our big problems we had previously was we weren't getting it right first time. So first contact resolution was super important to us to get right. And when we measured the first contact resolution rate, and we did side-by-side comparison, like for like, where people did not use the guided help approach, we got 62%. When we used the guided help, we were getting 85% plus. So that, as we mentioned earlier, 23 percentage points up, 37% improvement. We also improved the customer satisfaction, and the use of guided help contributed to a 30-point increase in Net Promoter Score of our customers, so really significant. And we had a big problem with complaints. Yeah, you can see this if you look at the UK regulator. We had a problem. We've really reduced the number of complaints now and made a massive difference there. So, huge difference because we are being consistent and we are getting it right. In terms of training now, we moved from where we had to cram people's brains with the information on all of the processes and all of the systems, how to find things, how to search for things that are potentially difficult to find. We've moved that to teach them to how to use the guided help, which is far more straightforward. And as part of that, we made a 50% improvement in speed to competency. So this is the time from when a new starter joins the organisation to the point when they are effectively up to speed and running as a competent advisor. We reduce that from 6 months to often less than 3 months. And sometimes previously we were on 6, 7, 8, 9 months to actually get to that same position. So it's really made a huge difference there. So from a frontline perspective, customer experience or CX, we've got consistent information and we've got a better experience, which is driving great customer service. And we're seeing that come through on our customer satisfaction surveys and the feedback we get from customers. Business experience or BX, we've got first contact resolution is massively improved. We've aligned the handle time. That big range in performance we talked about earlier is much reduced now, so much more aligned handle time. We've reduced complaints because we're being consistent and we're getting it right. And we've got much more focused training. Advisor experience, AX. The advisors have the knowledge at their fingertips. The KPIs are achievable because if you follow the instructions, you will achieve it. The right information is there and we're being consistent. And the advisor confidence is much better. Previously, we found sometimes a customer would phone back because an advisor was searching around for things. They couldn't find what they were looking for. And the customer went away not sure whether the person was giving them the correct information or not. It wasn't the advisor's fault, it was just difficult to find what they needed to find. So now the advisors are confident in what they're saying, so they're going away thinking, you've said this will happen, it will happen. I don't need to phone somebody else and ask them. So essentially made a huge difference there. So one thing we found, which was really, I think we knew we were going to get it, but we didn't realise how powerful this was going to be, was the output of the metrics and things and finally getting that reason for the customer contacting us. Because previously, when we'd used tick sheets, we'd never been at best 40% accurate, sometimes worse than that. But now we had a really good accuracy level of reason for contact. So what we do essentially, when the agent follows the guided help, we extract the reasons for contact out of that because we know that by the guided help they've followed. We then add it with some additional metrics and call reasons. We then use that information for two purposes. Purpose number one, business awareness of call drivers, and we'll come on to that in a moment. And the second one is people and performance management. So what this has given us that we didn't have previously is the ability to provide the analytics community with the information to split by call reason, so that from that you can track how well a process, so if you've deployed a new product or changed a process, you can actually track to see how that process is performing. Previously, we wouldn't have this level of information. You can get really granular with the output we get on this, and especially with combining it with other metrics. We can then measure and see if customer satisfaction's changed on which process is driving that, because you can fix things then that you would never be able to find before. It's also allowed us to find problems that you would never be able to find previously. So if, for example, you had a problem with a handset that only sold maybe a couple of 100,000 rather than millions of them, you can find really finite problems with those because you can look at percentage trends and things out the back of it. So it's been super helpful. It's helped us prioritize improvements. Again, by having this reason for call, it's really helped us get into the details of which processes are driving the challenges. And we got business buy-in to help us fix those. So the wider team effectively set that up so that each person was accountable for the processes. So we used the information to tell them how they were performing, and when they weren't performing, it gave us the insight to allow us to drive those corrective actions to put things right. We integrated the call reasons and linked them to call recordings. So by integrating things, the sum of the parts becomes greater than the individual components. That then allows us to listen to calls by call type, so that people can listen and hear about. When we launched Wi-Fi calling was a good example. You could listen to the calls specifically that had come in about Wi-Fi calling to understand what the experience was. You could search by call reason across the board and really drill in and find things. But also, the managers could tag the best practice calls within there so that we can effectively share on what good looks like with the customers. And that helps people with coaching and things like that improve the agent experience. So now not only do we say where people need to improve, but we can tell them how they need to improve. And our key learnings that we took away, these four are the real ones that kind of resonated when we went through. The first thing was we deployed dual screens as part of it because we found it really effective by splitting the knowledge and the CRM and the other systems the guys needed to use so that they could effectively keep them separate so that you tend to make less mistakes and it made it more efficient. So that was really helpful. Transparent reporting was another thing that really made a difference because we didn't effectively hide behind the information that we were getting out of the product. We published it to the advisors. We even published and had information to the level of detail of how quickly you'd clicked through a guided help. And we used that for the next point, which is we had a little bit of a challenge of a cultural shift moving from search-based, where people had everything in their heads and remembering it and finding things on search, to moving to the guided help. And the reason for that was some people thought, well, I don't get this change of approach. You know, I know what I'm doing. I've been doing it for many, many years, and I believe I'm great at it. But we used the reporting to demonstrate that when you actually use the new tool, it improved your performance. It improved your first contact resolution. Your customers were happier. So by using that information, it really helped tell the story back to the advisors to help move that cultural shift. And the final one, IT resiliency. When we had search-based knowledge, if the system was unavailable, you might hear about it a few hours later, maybe the next day, maybe a week later. You know, people may not notice so much. But this now has become so ingrained and so part of the process. We need effectively as close to 100% uptime as possible. And we effectively learn to make sure you've got some resiliency there, and as discussed earlier, keeping the uptime there is really, really important, and we do really well at that. But just one thing we learned that as part of the journey we didn't really worry too much about previously. So that's essentially where we've got to in terms of learnings, but what about the future now? So we've recently gone through the upgrade. We were on version 10, which we did a lot of customization on, and we've moved now to version 15, which is fantastic, and we've moved out some of the bespoke customization we did to help us make sure that we can continue the journey through the versions and keep up to date and get the latest and greatest features as we move forward. We're doing continuous improvement on our conversational guidance principles and ensuring we listen to our advisor feedback further. And the key thing there is to simplify and optimize the guided help. What we found, as you will all know, is this is a continuous journey and a continuous improvement path. We've got to keep working at it to make it better and better and better and better. Simpler, faster flows, more refined tuning. We're also doing further automation to essentially drive down the time required to process things, because one of the big advantages we can do is, you probably saw in the example earlier, in the middle of the screen, it told you to go in the CRM and do this, that and the other. Wouldn't it be great if we could do that automatically for them? That would really save some time. If it's a simple process, we want to kind of automate it on from there. And enhancements to make the system more intuitive and let the advisors find what they want more quickly. So essentially there, it's just really getting that first point, making sure you're getting exactly the place you need to go and as deep in as possible with as much information and context as possible. And finishing essentially faster resolution paths based on advisor competency. So some people, or when you start with a particular process, you need more guidance on it. But when you become familiar and use that process repeatedly, you need a little bit less guidance. You can do it a little bit quicker because you've learnt the process. So we'd like to use the competency of the advisor to feed and drive how much detail flow we need to go through there. Thank you.